My name is Vanessa, as Jack said, and I'm thrilled to be your Courage host today alongside Dina, who has made this Courage Month possible. And Dina, of course, is from Leading with Courage, and a lot of you would be familiar with her work already. In a moment, I'll invite Dina to reflect on some of the stories that we've heard this month and some of the experiences that we've also heard about and we've seen throughout the month of November, and particularly about what she's come across and what she's learned from just listening to the stories that have been told. There's been no shortage of those stories from both of our two Courage Couch sessions that we've held so far. And we are very fortunate today to be hearing from two courageous women, both from different parts of the world. And I find that incredible. One is in the US, the other one is in China, and we'll get to their stories very, very shortly. But Emily Angwin is joining us from China, and she'll be sharing her story of courage for a career change. And right now, hands up to Emily. She's done a fantastic job making the move from Australia to China, particularly with all the tension that's going on between the two countries and also the distance between family that we've seen this year. From the US, we've got Arlinda McIntosh. Now, Arlinda is the creative director and founder of Sophista Funk, and we'll be exploring courage for advanced style and what it means to Arlinda a little later on this morning as well. So a big thank you to both Arlinda and Emily for joining us as our guests today. We look forward to meeting you very soon. But first, before we speak to these amazing ladies, and also Dina, who is also an amazing lady, I'd just like to remind you of a couple of things. We'd like you to join in our conversation online by using the hashtag Courage Month and share the insights you gain from our speakers. And please share your own stories as well. We've heard some wonderful stories from people who have attended our conferences this month. Please tell your friends and colleagues all about Courage Month. Encourage them to explore the videos that we'll post a little bit later in the year online, although the year is quickly coming to an end. And as you're listening to our Courage conversations today, please add any questions you may have in our chat and in our chat area. We will be asking some of your questions to both our guest speakers, and we'll try to get through as many as possible. So Jack, I'll get you to put up that chat in just a moment. Now, before I introduce my fellow Courage host, Dina, I wanted to share my own story. At the start of the month, I spoke about how I'd been made redundant, and I was in a very bizarre place where I'd been traveling around the country despite border closures. Somehow I managed to get around most of this country. I think the only places I haven't been this year is Western Australia and the Northern Territory. So I find that quite incredible that, you know, sometimes you've got to let nothing stop you, including closed borders. Where there's a will, there is a way. Okay. I've now recently started a new role as a presenter with Sky News Australia, and I've been meeting new colleagues this week, learning the ropes of a new newsroom, and I've got to say it takes all the courage you can find within yourself to start a new job. I thought going back and being a weather presenter would be really, really simple. That side of it I'm coping with fine, but it's all the technology and the different computer software that they use, and it's made me realise that despite being familiar with certain software, there's always a different component that different companies use, and I feel really quite silly at the moment, despite everything. But look, you know, I am drawing on courage, and I'm drawing on everything that we've spoken about this month to make sure that this new role that I'm in really works, and to not be so overwhelmed despite how you're feeling inside. And I'm sure that's what we'll be discussing with Arlinda and also Emily today, who have both courageously gone on to amazing careers. Today, I'm personally looking forward to hearing both of our speakers who have drawn on that courage, and that's why I spoke about where I'm at right now with work. So we're all in different spaces as we join this conference today. But right now, I would like to introduce the courage chick herself, Dina Pozzo, who is going to reflect and share some of the courage that she has discovered over the past few weeks of Courage Month. Good morning, Dina. It's going to be really hard to break this down.
It is indeed. Vanessa, thank you so much. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the many lands of which we meet today. And I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. Welcome to all who are joining us for the first time this Courage Month, and welcome back if we've seen you in the last couple of weeks. As Vanessa said, so many stories of courage that I've been very lucky to have heard and have had shared with me in the last few weeks. I'm going to share with you one story, and it's a story of courage that I've observed, and with the permission of Peter Butko, who is on this call, I'd like to share a conversation that he and I had recently. Peter and I were chatting and we started reminiscing about his and Bryce's wedding. And we were talking about some of the emotions that Peter experienced on his wedding day. And, Peter shared with me that he felt uncomfortable holding Bryce's hand in public, and he was tempted to seek out the least public of public places for their wedding photos. He shared about how he felt kissing Bryce in front of family and friends, as this was not something that they had done before. And this is only the short version of Peter's story. So I asked Peter if he would consider writing a blog about his experience for us, which he has. I consider Peter to be really courageous in writing this blog. In doing so, he's leaning into vulnerability. He will be sharing his story with the many people who read our blogs on our website, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter. And why is this courageous? When we share our personal information, we're vulnerable. We're putting our stories in the hands of others. And we hope and trust that those who read our stories, that those who hear our stories, will hold that information with honour. But we can't be guaranteed that that's going to be the case. And that in itself is vulnerability, and that in itself is courageous. What have I learned about Peter's, or from Peter's story, I should say? It taught me that I come from privilege, not in the sense of financial privilege or status, but privilege from the point of view of being heterosexual. Privilege in terms of what parts of society value and deem to be okay, not okay. I don't think twice about holding Jeff's hand in public. I've never been concerned for my safety in doing so because, after all I'm doing is I'm demonstrating love. It's always been okay. Thankfully, it's now becoming more and more okay for same gender relationships to do the same. But we still have a way to go. Peter's story filled my heart. It also reminded me to check in with others, friends, colleagues, with respect to diversity, inclusion, and belonging. I encourage you to read Peter's story, which will be made available on December 9. With all my heart, Peter, thank you. Vanessa, let's hear some more stories that no doubt are going to inspire us, like Peter's story has inspired me.
Thank you, Dina. And that's just one of the many inspirational stories that we've heard this month. There's been so many of them, and we're about to hear some more from our very special guest. Our first guest today on the Courage Couch is Emily Angwin. Now, as I said before, Emily has done something quite, well, I feel is quite amazing. She's had the courage to pick up from Melbourne where, things are very safe. She's got her family there. She had a job and she's moved over to China for a career change. That in itself, just a career change, let alone a different country, says all about courage. Emily Angwin, if you're not familiar with her work, is an anchor at CGTN in Beijing, China. She hosts The World Today and she covers international news and also broadcasts live to correspondents and experts on issues all around the globe. Emily was a reporter and presenter for 7 News for more than 8 years, reporting on everything from crime to court stories to state and federal politics for both the local and national news services. She also covered many sporting events, including the Australian Open and Rio Games. So it takes a lot of courage to leave that kind of job and move on to something else. Good morning, Emily. Thank you for joining us all the way from China. I believe it's just started snowing there.
It has. It is just past 7 a.m. this morning, and we had our first snow a few days ago. And I see all of your beautiful, well, those of you who are in Australia, all your beautiful backgrounds and your bright sunshine. And I get a little bit homesick, especially Jeff just showed us a little bit of where he is, and it just looks beautiful. Australia is such a beautiful country, so you're all very lucky.
Yeah,
and I do feel somewhat inferior after Dina's story because, what a wonderful, courageous story she has shared. So I'm a little bit, I don't know if I fit the mold for being courageous.
No, you definitely do. And I saw that when we first said that we're doing Courage Month, you said you felt like an imposter. You're definitely not an imposter. So let's talk about your story. You've made the move from radio to TV. That's something I also did, so I understand exactly how that feels. What did you learn about yourself and your courage moving from being slightly anonymous behind the microphone, which you're a voice and you're a very strong voice, but people don't know who you are and you can anonymously walk around any city. But when you have a full public profile on TV, it's completely different. What sort of courage did you draw on to make that transition?
Well, the courage that look, I just followed my heart, I guess, in terms of drawing on courage. I just followed, radio is an amazing medium. It's very immediate. You actually do work a lot on your own. You can call into the studio wherever you are and file a story. But I guess, for me, I get courage from other people. And so in television, you work in a team and you work with a cameraman and you work with an editor and you work with the producer, and as you know, Vanessa. So I draw courage and I guess creativity and motivation from other people. And, it's interesting. I always thought to myself, when I was young sort of journalist starting out, TV, I want to be able to, I want people to hear my stories and recognize me. And then as soon as I got into TV, I was like, oh God, I don't want, I want to be able to go to the pub and have a cheeky beer or a pint and not get recognized. And really very few people.
Not be judged that you've probably had two instead of one.
No, I don't want to do anything. No, most of the time I'm very well behaved. But not to be able to have a beer and not be judged is quite lovely. But look, really, I mean, people in Australia are just, they're very warm and open, and I've very rarely had any negative reactions. In fact, the only time that you really have negative reactions are from people who have, are grieving or have had something horrific happen to them. So more often than not, it's understandable.
And you brought up what you pretty much spoke about there was that you draw on other people. That's a conversation that we've been having all month as well. We call it courage is courageous. So there's another example of courage is contagious, and that is the perfect example. Look, it would be wrong of me not to ask you this question. What has it been like to live through the global pandemic, 1,000 miles from home and family and friends, and also the fact that you are living in China and the relationship between Australia and China has been really tense?
How long have we got? And we only got it is when I decided to leave Australia and do this adventure in 2019, which seems like a lifetime ago, who could have predicted what has unfolded, and particularly China being at the center of it in so many ways. And, I describe it, the way that I kind of rationalize it at the moment is I'm in the belly of the beast. So I guess I get to kind of see, I know the Australian perspective, but I now get to see the Chinese perspective and how they see and view and talk about the world. And, to be frank, at times it's been really tough. Culturally, they're very, very different to us in Australia, but also there's some really amazing parts of this country too. The pandemic, I came back to Australia in February to visit my family, and at that time it was really kicking off here and in China, and my family and friends said, what are you doing? Like, don't go back, like just stay here. And I thought, no, I want to finish what I started. And so I returned, and the way everything unfolded, China is one of the safest places to be at the moment, ironically. And then the tensions between Australia and China, that's a tough one. That's a really, really tough one. And there's been all sorts of tough things that and another time in another space I would love to go into and talk about more freely, and that's part of what I have found challenging. But ultimately, this has been an experience that as a journalist, I will never, ever forget. And it's given me such a greater insight into how I will go forward in my reporting and my values and my morals. And that's what I'm trying to focus on at this point. It will have its shelf life, but at the moment, it's been an incredible, insightful experience.
Yeah, and I guess you get, because you are seeing both sides of it as a journalist, it's really important to try and not be biased, even though it's at times hard not to be. But it must be really interesting to see the both sides of this and be able to sort of go, well, I can see it from this point of view, but I can also see it from this point of view. Just at this point, I'd like to encourage anybody, if you have a question for Emily, to jump onto our chat, and hopefully we'll get through to those a little later on this morning. Emily, at any point have you thought, oh, I just can't do this anymore, I need to go home? What is the driving force for you? What is the courage that's keeping you there?
You know, the thing about Australian media, and congratulations on your new role, by the way, Vanessa. That's good. The thing about Australian news, how do I put this in a way that's diplomatic? You know, I wanted to get some international experience, and so often with Australian news, well, particularly, I can only talk about my own experience, but particularly in Victoria and in Melbourne, it's very localized. So we would talk about, you know, petrol prices going up, but not why they're going up. And, you know, I remember our international section of our bulletin, I'm not sure if it's still the same, was only sort of 1:32 minutes. And I really wanted, the reason why I'm still here is because I get that international experience. I am covering at the moment, you know, what's happening in Ethiopia, in the Tigray region. I covered the US election, what's happening in Israel, Iran, with Palestine, all of those things that I would never have had the opportunity to do. As much as I do love a service station robbery and a stolen dog, which are all very important stories and it's all relative, it's been great to have an opportunity to tell some broader international news, and that's why.
I really understand that too, because it's funny when you go overseas and you watch international broadcasts and then you come back home, you can really see the difference, and you think, how much information am I actually missing out on? I feel like I'm across the news, but really, how much of it am I getting, because we just don't have access to it? Although with different platforms now opening up and other forms of media, you can get some of that, but it is hard, and that's why it's really courageous for you to actually take that step and jump into.
And it's subjective as well, you know, what I find newsworthy versus what someone else does, you know, it's all very subjective, and it's certainly not a judgment on anyone. You know, focusing on local news, international news, national news, it's all a personal taste.
And it's broadening your horizon as well. I have a question from Simon. We just have to be careful with some of these questions. I'll ask half of it. Have you experienced any pressure from authorities to behave?
No. In terms of authorities, as in police or anything like that, no. I mean, I work for a Chinese television station, so I knew that when I came in, that there were going to be challenges and the Chinese perspective. And I've had a lot of conversations about that, and with Chinese staff and with Chinese bosses. I sort of liken it to, I guess, how would I liken it to? It is like any news organization, Fox News in America, at times Sky News in Australia, you know, if there are people with a variety of perspectives that they want to push, but you know, at the end of the day, I need to be able to sleep at night, and I need to feel that I'm still following my morals and my values. And so how you write a story and even how you deliver a line can give it a more balanced approach, and therefore I'm always staying true to myself, rightly or wrongly. So no, I haven't felt, it's been challenging, but I haven't felt pressure, if that answers the question.
That does. How do you tackle bosses when it comes to that? Where do you find the courage to say, hey, no, I think it should be done this way, and stick to your guns?
Well, you certainly don't do that in China. They're very, culturally, it's very different. I mean, they very much follow a hierarchy here, which has taken a lot of adjustment for me, actually, because, you know, I'm used to a newsroom in Australia, which is buzzing and everyone's this and that, and, you know, F this and F that, and come on, blah, 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 blah. And here it's a lot more, you know, everyone is quiet and calm. And so that took some adjusting, but ultimately the way that you phrase something, you know, if you sort of say, oh, look, what do you think about just being diplomatic and being aware of your surroundings and culturally? I mean, no one raises their voice here. No one, you know, disrespects their bosses. It's it's about having a very calm and respectful conversation. So that has been a little bit of a challenge for me.
Yeah, that is a little bit different to how we do things here, but just we're running out of time for this session. But have you noticed a difference in courage levels between Australia and China?
Yeah, Jack sent me this question, and I thought to myself, how do I answer that? I guess courage is all relative. The medics in Wuhan are just as courageous as the medics that we have in Australia, and the challenges here are different for people. There are people that work physically very hard here. People are on the streets cleaning and working really hard labor jobs. So I think that takes courage. I think the fact that people want to try and speak English to me, it takes courage. I try and speak a little bit of Chinese, and that's just woeful. That's not courageous, it's just stupid. But yeah, courage is all relative, and there are beautiful, courageous people here, and there are beautiful, courageous people in Australia, and it's all just perspective.
Yes, it is. And I'm glad that you brought up medics, because I think this year we really have seen a lot more courageous people than what perhaps we thought we normally would have. It really has been an incredible year. We'd like to thank you so much for joining us this morning, Emily. We will come back to you a little later on. I'd love it if all of our audience could ask some questions. So please jump onto the chat and ask any questions that you have for Emily, and we'll get onto that a little later on this morning. Also, don't forget to join in the conversation with our hashtag Courage Couch. But right now, I'd like to welcome our next guest from the USA, where it's also winter as well. So I dare say there's a bit of snow around the US at the moment, and also a lot has been going on there as well. Arlinda McIntosh is the creative director and founder of SophistiFunk. If you don't know the company, go online and have a look. I have been stalking her Instagram. It's really quite amazing. Now, SophistiFunk will be exploring the courage for advanced style. So the youngest of 3 children, Arlinda's creativity was apparent at a very early age. By her pre-teens, she was already creating skirts and accessories for herself. She began her professional career creating custom garments and redesigning shoes, and by the early 1970s had honed her production skills by performing piecework and hand finishing garments before fashion executive Barry S. recognised Arlinda's unique talent and therefore encouraged her to strike out on her own. And that's why we have this creative space today that Arlinda is in. By the 1990s, Arlinda's unique design sensibilities and attention to detail impressed music producer P. Diddy, who we all know. That led to design commissions for many industry executives and entertainers, including Lauryn Hill, Mary J. Blige, Queen, Latifah, and many others. Very successful career indeed. It was in 2000 that Arlinda and her daughter-in-law Cheshire launched SophistiFunk, the Skirt Co., their first boutique and label. And ever since then, she's become a prominent member of the global advanced style community. And the big loves of her fashionable life are, of course, big skirts, dance, glitter, soap bubbles, vintage finery, and the fairy tale. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, jump onto her Instagram and check it out. I'm sure you'll love it. Good morning, Arlinda. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from the US in your little creative space there.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Great to have you on board. Now, firstly, tell us a little bit about what took fashion from a hobby to a business.
Okay, so I'll try to make it short. It was in the 80s, maybe. I was married, and I'll give you the short version. So I was married, I was young, and I came home. I was working at a cable company, I think I was a receptionist, and I went home for lunch to surprise my husband with lunch, and he had left because, well, now that I look back, he just wasn't ready for marriage or whatever and everything that came with it. So me, I have children there. I have to think of how am I going to get to the next day, the next week, the next month. And I called my friend, one of my girlfriends, and I told her what happened. And I'm like, okay, I got to get this rent. That's the first thing that comes to your mind. You can't panic. You got to figure out how you're going to get to the next day. So the comment she made to me was hilarious at the time. So she's like, well, why don't you make me and Joy, I had a couple of other girlfriends. She said, why don't you make us something and, we'll we'll pay you. First thought was, wait, you want me to make something? You can
No
go to the mall. You can go to the mall and buy something. So, you know, they came over and we talked about it, and I ended up buying denim and ripping it up and putting bleach and whatever. And I made 5 jumper dresses, and I invited them over, and that would be my first, not knowing, I mean, knowing now, but not knowing then, that would be my first thing, you know, jump in at designing something for someone to purchase. We talked and we spoke about it, and you know, of course we talked about the personal side. So they ended up getting the dresses, and I'm like, wow, I have $125. Wow, that was easy. I didn't even think about what I was doing. I just did something. So I asked them if they would come back the following week. If I did it again, would they come back the following week? So they was like, yeah. So I took a portion of that money, went back to the little dollar fabric store, and I bought more fabric. And I thought, well, if they're going to come back and bring people, I should have something for them to eat or drink, but I don't have enough money. So, okay, I have this. So I went and I bought Welch's white grape juice. I bought 1 bottle, and I bought a bunch of white grapes, because, you know, it has to match. It's got to be cute on the table. So, but I didn't think at the time that 1 bottle, it didn't dawn on me that 1 bottle is not going to make it through ever how many people that were coming. And it didn't, but nobody said anything. They ate the grapes and they made purchases. And that, the short story beyond that is I just kept doing that same thing every week, not looking at it like a job or as a business. I knew I was getting my rent and getting the money to feed my children. So I didn't have, when I think back, you know, I've often said that, you know, I hear people say that they use the phrase, and I used to use it, failure wasn't an option, but it was. Failure is always an option. You just have to choose to or not.
And
You know,
in your situation, what I find interesting is you used courage to survive, and that's what you really didn't have an option to fail at that point, because you needed to survive. You needed to pay the rent and look after your children. I have to ask this question: did you buy more juice for the next couple of weeks? Were you okay?
Yeah, I bought, it was always the Welch's white grape juice, and Welch's white, and always the white grapes, because they look cute. Well, they're kind of green, but, you know, it looked good together, and they kept my palette neutral so they would see the garments. And to this day, I still do the same thing.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And it's good that you've kept that tradition going as well. I love it. Let's talk about being a fashionista after 50 in the fiercely competitive fashion capital of the world. Is it still hard to stay relevant? I mean, these days we have lots of influencers, we have social media. That's where the younger people are drawing their inspiration from. Where is your space, and how do you keep going and stay relevant?
Wow, that's a loaded one. I don't know. I just keep going. I just keep posting and posting. And I haven't been on Instagram that long. I mean, I've been a part of social media since, wow, many, many years, before Facebook, before MySpace, and before, like, a long way back. But as a business, well, my personal brand, I just started making posts. But as it relates to my business, I started photographing myself in the clothing, because I couldn't find, I always wanted to shoot older women. And every time I find someone that I wanted to photograph, they're like, oh no, but I have my daughter and she's so young and she's so tall and she's so thin. And I'm like, yeah, but no, but I want you, because you're not, and you're short and you're plump and you are not what people expect, but you are a human being and you're beautiful anyway, and you wear clothes. So to answer the question about staying relevant, I guess I don't really try. I just do it. I do. And that I have no answer for. I just
Keep going. No.
continue doing the same thing. I do learn a lot about social media. You know, my website, I manage myself, because I refuse to be my age and not, and have young people say to me, oh, who does that for you, your children? Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah.
When they find I have an Instagram, oh my God, that's so cute. I bet your kids are so tired of you. And I'm like, oh no, I kind of teach social media to women my age. So, but it is, I guess if you have something that you're doing, like I realize that people are looking at me and they're saying, um, oh, I love your style. You're so full of energy, what have you. The clothing that I wear is what I've always worn. So I never saw myself as dressing any differently than anyone else. So if that's what's keeping me relevant, I mean, if that's it, then that's going to continue because I don't know how to dress any other way. I mean, look at my hair. I just do whatever. If my mind says try it, as long as I'm not going to end up any place I don't want to be, I try it. Fashion is only fabrics, and staying relevant is only staying true to who you are in the space that you're in. I know that I'm on Instagram, I'm on social media. Someone said that I'm an influencer, and I'm like, okay. Um, so I guess I just continue to do what I do as a great grandmother, and fashion person.
And that's great because you're following your heart, you're following your mind, and for you, it's worked out. So why would you want to do it any other way? For a couple of people, after your Instagram handle, it's Funking After 50 and Sophista Funk the Skirt Co. While we're talking about age, and I don't mean to be set in this sort of age space, but one question from Shona, it's actually quite a few questions, but the one I'll ask is, do you think that you have more courage with age?
Oh, of course, yes. It's no question. You do have to find a filter. I don't use mine
You
often.
let go of the filter the older you got. That's what I was looking forward to.
Well, sometimes honestly, the first time you remove that filter, it's very difficult to find it back or to even care if you find it. Some I don't make suggestions. Like someone just asked me in another interview about advice, and I tell them I don't give advice. I'm scared. I tell you what works for me. So what works for me is I say what, if you ask me a question, make sure that you want the answer because I'm going to give it to you. Aging, if you first understand that you are past 40, you're past 50, say to yourself, I've said to me, I'm not going to worry about the things that I worried about in my 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s because that would be redundant. I am 63. I have wrinkle here. I'm pretty sure I have something under here. I lift my arm and there's something happening. I can't see it. I don't look at it.
That's great. That's how we should. That's how we have to approach getting older. I think that's a very courageous way of looking at it. We have to wrap up, but I just want to ask one quick question: how are you needing to use courage in the current environment?
Say that again.
How are you needing to use courage in the current environment with the pandemic and
With the pandemic, you have to be courageous enough to say, I'm not going around these people because there's a pandemic happening. You have to be courageous enough to tell people I had an event. I had something I had to do yesterday. You have to be courageous enough you have to be comfortable enough to be courageous enough to say, I can't hug you. I know we're used to the hug. We're used to this and that, but you have to be comfortable enough to say, I can't do that today. So, and you have to be courageous enough for me to say, like, my shop is by appointment. We are not by appointment right now. We are Zooming. You can do a pickup or what have you, but you have to find a way to say, you have to be comfortable enough and courageous enough to say what is you need to say to keep yourself safe in business or not in business.
That is such great advice. I remember at the start of the pandemic, I saw my parents for the first time in a couple of months. And our Premier had said from day one, don't hug your parents. I'm not doing it. And it was probably what stuck in my mind the most. When I saw my parents, they tried to hug me and I said no. And they got really, really upset with me. And I had to find all the courage, I don't know what other word I could use for it, to say, no, we're not allowed to. And they got really upset with me as well. They just didn't understand and thought I was carrying on a little bit. So you are right. You have to be really courageous in the decisions that you make right now.
Yeah, it's very, very, very difficult. The same thing. I have great grandchildren, and And even in my shop, people are used to coming in and, we hug, we laugh. We can't. Right now you can't. And actually, I'm not going to say it's a good thing, but in everything bad, there is some good in it, because for me, you learn that there are certain things that we used to do that we really don't have to do. We don't, we've been taught you got to hug, but you don't have to do that to show your affection. So for me, it has given me another way to show affection. Like I just started, I just designed these note cards. I want to help my clients and people to learn to write again. We write here now, but try little things like write a note, send a note to someone, call them up and say hello on a phone.
That's one thing I found. We pick up the phone a lot more, which is something that I really enjoy, because I think we were too busy texting each other, and FaceTime and Zooming has really added to the process as well. So I think we're actually more connected than what we ever have been, despite how we feel about hugs. We need to leave it there, Arlinda. Thank you so much for joining us. From Roz, she says, my mother kept coming too close. I had to maintain distance. Now Mum and I do 20-second hugs in Melbourne. So everyone's learning to adapt in different ways, and who knows, Roz probably feels really good about that too. I'd like to invite Emily back into the room so we can have a chat. I have a question from Peter, Emily. Do you use courage to manage self-doubt in putting yourself out there on a global stage and balancing your dreams with fears?
Whoa. Wow. Very early for that kind of question.
We forget what time it is over there.
Sorry, can you just repeat the first part of that again, Vanessa?
I'm breaking it down for you. Do you use courage to manage self-doubt? You've put yourself out on a global stage, which that must be hard to do in itself. And also you're balancing dreams with fears. So I guess it's how you're using courage to get through those self-doubts and also fears.
Yes. Well, I think, self-doubt is so normal. It is, everyone has self-doubt, and I am no stranger to it. And, you have those moments where you're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking, what am I doing? What am I doing? I'm sure everyone has had those moments, and I certainly have had them too, all the time, and you get anxious. But I also try to remember that I'm not saving lives. From very early in my career, I have said to myself, I'm not saving lives. I'm telling people the news. And most of the time people are sort of doing one, most people have two screens anyway. No one really is listening wholeheartedly. So I try and tell myself that anyway.
They are.
And yeah, I'm not saving lives. I'm just telling the news. I just try and keep it really real. And my family and my friends couldn't give a shit if I was cleaning toilets for a living, or on the tally, or a millionaire, or, a teacher. They just want me to be happy. And so I think as long as you stay grounded, it keeps perspective. Therefore, you can be courageous to do whatever you want, if that makes sense.
It does, and I feel that that is the point that I've taken out of this year. It's the people that surround you, and it's the people that you can fall on when you need to, and they don't give you any bullshit. They tell you as it is, and I think that's what you're also trying to say there. Arlinda, is there anyone in particular that you've had a massive career? Is there anyone in particular that you've met that is really courageous or has done something really courageous?
Oh my gosh, so many. You mean in my age bracket or just general?
No, just in your advanced style community.
Oh, wow. I could look at a lot of my clients that are continuing to live, and so many of them, I'm going to pick at least 4 that have just contacted me to order a particular amount of items to wear while they are going through chemo. That keeps me going. And when they contact me to tell me, I was just diagnosed with this cancer or that cancer, which I'm so sick of that word. I find them, it is so courageous of them to, to think of, other than them being gonna have to go through this chemo, this treatment. They're courageous enough to say, you know what, I'm not going to stop dressing the way that I dress. In fact, I'm going to get more so that I have something to make me feel good while I'm going through this. So that takes a lot, because I'm going to say each one of them is past 50 that have contacted me. So yeah, kudos to them. Yeah, that takes a lot of courage. I don't know if I can have a lot of courage. I don't know how I would deal with that. But I mean, I also teach, or not teach, but I talk to them, most of my clients and friends. When you accept what is, it's so much easier. You just got to find the courage to accept it and know that it's nothing you could do to change it. So how do you live on with it, regardless of what it is?
Can't come to you for some fashion. I mean, we all need something to make ourselves feel good, and that definitely makes people feel good. Thank you for sharing that story. Emily, what about you? I mean, you've spoken to a lot of people in your career. Is there one story that particularly stands out as a story of courage?
Yeah, there is one that comes to mind, and it was when I was working at Channel 7, and it started off quite a horrific story. A little boy was crossing the road, a suburban street in Melbourne, was crossing the road, and a motorcyclist came past. He was crossing the road with his brother, and he went ahead, and a motorcyclist came past and cleaned him up, and he died. And it was sort of a cul-de-sac, and there was a large Maori community in the cul-de-sac, and they heard about what had happened to this little boy, and they had a church group nearby, and they all, I think it must be a tradition in the Maori culture. I don't know the specifics, but they all sang, and this father who had lost his little boy and was clutching this teddy that his little boy used to hold. And then this group of beautiful Maori people from the local church had heard what happened and sang as they walked down the street towards this father holding this toy. And it was just the most impromptu, magical, beautiful, courageous, special moment to see, first of all, the courage of these people to reach out to someone during such a horrific moment, and a father to have the courage to stand there and accept it. And for me, I'll always remember that. It was very, very powerful.
And Emily, how do you find the courage to, I mean, you've been given a brief in the morning that you're going to something like that. How do you find the courage to face those kind of stories day in, day out?
Many, many vices. Alcohol? No. You know, age is a wonderful thing because it gives you perspective, and you know, it's probably one thing I might use the opportunity to say, and Vanessa, you probably agree that the media industry is not particularly good at helping young journalists who have you know, I was 23 and I was covering a 5-car fatal car accident and knocking on the door of families who have lost their twin daughters. And so it's very difficult to go through those times. But with each story, you get a different skill set, and you learn and you evolve and you adapt, and it changes your perspective. And so that I don't take life too seriously, because it can be taken away in an instant. And we see that all the time. So I just try to hold on to that and then use my various vices to process that, and beautiful friends and family.
It is incredible as time goes on, the more that you experience, which we've also been talking about this month, and both Arlinda and Emily have given some great examples there. Over time, we use our experiences to find more courage within ourselves and continue that journey. I'd like to thank Emily and Arlinda for joining us today from the US and also China. Enjoy winter. Enjoy the snow. Emily, I was just reflecting on a photo that I took 2 years ago. I was in Moscow and I woke up the next morning, like I just arrived, the next morning I woke up and the first snow had fallen. So I know that feeling. It's quite joyous when you watch a season change like that.
It's very special. It's very special to open. I mean, I don't know if it snows where Arlinda is, but when you open your window, when you open your curtains and you see snow outside, it's something pretty special for an Australian. But then you get over it very quickly and you start the cold.
Yes.
Then you really got months to go.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I have to deal with this for 3 months. But yeah, it's beautiful in the moment.
Well, I wish you both all the best this winter. Emily, hopefully we'll see you back in Australia sometime soon and you'll be rejoining your family. Arlinda, good luck, and hopefully there's hugs just around the corner for you. Thank you to our very courageous women this morning, and for everybody for joining us. I'd like to welcome Dina back to reflect on some of the conversations that we've had this morning with both Arlinda and Emily.
Great, thank you, Vanessa. And Emily, I understand the first snow is gorgeous, and then after that, you quickly get over it. We lived in Moscow for a couple of years, and you know, when there's 6 months of snow, I needed courage to deal with that. But on that note, so many notes again, like every other week. And Emily, you know, you're as courageous as Peter is courageous, as Arlinda is courageous, as is every other single person on this call. You know, Emily, when I think about, you know, you chose to go to China and work there, you chose to further your career, you chose to go back into a pandemic. Oh my God, how courageous. You know, so there's so much in that. And, you know, Emily, you spoke about, you followed your heart. And people on the call may know that courage, the word courage, is derived from the Latin word, which I'm not going to try to say, for heart. So there is so much heart in courage. You talked about, Emily spoke about staying true to self, and that helps her be courageous. What we know is that when we're really clear on what's important to us and what our values are, that actually helps us make those decisions. And both Emily and Arlinda spoke about choice and decisions. We know that if we're really clear on our values, they're going to help us stay in courage. They're going to help us make the right choice, the right decision for us. You know, Emily, when you spoke about why you're still here, you know, as in China, and, you know, for you, the benefit of that international career and exposure is really important. And what I want everyone to think about is whenever you're making a decision, whatever that decision may be, whatever you're needing to choose, have a think about, what is the benefit for me? You know, how worthwhile is this act? Whether this act is to go to another part of the world, to take on a different role, or whether that's even, if I'm thinking of what Arlinda's advice around the courage to say, I'm not going to hug now, have a think about how worthwhile is this situation? How worthwhile is this act? Absolutely consider the risk involved, you know, and I'll link this to something that Arlinda said. She spoke about, you know, when my mind says try it, I will try it as long as I don't end up somewhere I don't want to be, or words to that effect. So question 1, how worthwhile is what I'm about to do? Question 2, what is the risk involved? Because if we don't consider the risk, we're being a little naive. And then as a result of reflecting on those 2 questions, then making a decision to act. And remember, sometimes it takes courage to do nothing. What else have I got here? Arlinda, what I heard from what Arlinda was saying was that she owns her strengths. She owns what she's good at, you know, whether it's Instagram, fashion, and she also owns herself in terms of, again, what's important to her. And sometimes it takes courage to do that. And I may have said this last week or the week before, but I'm going to say it again. Sometimes it takes courage to own what we're good at and to own being our authentic self, particularly when everyone else around you is behaving in a way, excuse me, in a way that they think is expected of them rather than being self. So, you know, there's a lot of courage in saying, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is what I love. And that's relevant for both Arlinda's and Emily's stories. And I can't emphasize enough a couple of things. What I need to be courageous, let me rephrase that. What I may need courage for, you may not, and vice versa. You know, so courage is also very subjective. And yes, we have our healthcare workers and cleaners that Emily spoke on, of who are demonstrating physical courage. You know, they're putting their physicality at risk by going out there and working. Arlinda spoke about the cancer, that those people who are currently going through cancer, you know, they're also demonstrating courage. They're demonstrating vital courage. You know, they're demonstrating the fight to stay alive. And then we also have moral courage. And moral courage is what we tend to see in most workplaces and communities and homes, because that's where our decisions come in. You know, am I going to stick to my values and make the moral, ethical choice? Am I making values-based decisions? So there are all different types of courage. So have a think about that. And I encourage everyone to consider when they have been courageous in the past, because when we stop to do that, we actually realize, oh, okay, so, you know, I did demonstrate courage in the past. And what we're doing is we're storing that data to be able to access it in future when we need to be courageous again. And I can't emphasize enough Arlinda's advice around, you know, right here, right now, wherever we are in the world, we may need courage to deal with this pandemic. Whether it's the courage to say, I would love to hug you, but I just can't do it right now. Looking forward to when we can. Or even, you know, in Melbourne with restrictions easing, you know, perhaps you need the courage to say to an employer, I'm not ready to come back to the physical workplace yet. You know, you may need courage to connect with others who don't seem to need to connect as often as you. So remember, courage does look different for different people, and what I need courage for, you may not, and vice versa. And that's where I'll leave it. Thank you, Vanessa.
Dina, thank you so much. Thank you for wrapping that up as well. What did I take out of that? I really love that you brought up again, Dina, what Arlinda said. I don't want to be somewhere I don't want to be. And, you know, that's probably what I've taken the most about my working career, particularly right now. I'm making decisions that I want to make. And for the first time, I've decided I don't want to put up with that anymore. I'm going in a different direction. I went traveling. That was a decision that I made. And that's where I wanted to be at that time, instead of running around looking for another job. And at the moment, I'm casually working, and I think it's the best thing that I could ever have done. So whatever it takes to find that courage to do and be who you want to be is pretty much what I've taken out of this whole month. So a big thank you to Dina, Jack, to our guests, Arlinda and Emily today. You've all had such a big influence on my life this month as well. I'd like to thank everybody who has joined us today and across the month. I hope you've taken away a lot, and you'll help to commit building courage across Australia and around the world. As you may have noticed, we have been recording the sessions. We will be sharing these with you in the coming weeks, so make sure you look out for those links. There's a small group of people who will be continuing the courage conversation with the courage class, which Dina will be hosting up next. Just a reminder, there is a different Zoom link for that one, so leave this one and jump into that one. I'm loving all the conversations here. Really loved having these courageous conversations. Thanks for sharing from Claire. Roz, thanks so much. Courage is contagious. I just love that line. I can't express it enough. If you'd like to join Dina for other courage classes and Dare to Lead workshops in 2021, please do. The full details and a whole host of courage resources are available at leadingwithcourage.com.au. For the participants of Courage Month, there will be a discount to access these sessions. Once again, thank you for joining us this month. I look forward to more conversations on social media. Please use the hashtag Courage Month and Courage Couch. Also, just courage in general. Thank you all for joining us this month, and to our guests and to everybody else, go out, be courageous. Remember, it is contagious. Thank you.